You're listening to The Extraction, conversations on the systems and strategies behind dental practice growth with Colin Ambler and Kyle Bergman. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Extraction Podcast. Your co-host, Kyle Bergman, along with my co-host and the CEO and co-founder of TeamCare, Colin Ambler. Today, we are joined by Phil Koury from Pacifico Dental Care. And Phil brings a really interesting operator perspective to the conversation for a few reasons. One, Phil is one of the earliest adopters and users of TeamCare, and Phil is also a software developer. Just like Colin, both of them got dragged into the dental industry by their better halves. And in this episode, Phil gets down into the nitty-gritty of what has led to Pacifico Dental Care now becoming a 3-practice juggernaut in the Pennsylvania area. So really exciting for you to check out what Phil is sharing with us today. Philip, you don't really have a background in dentistry, but yet here you are running a multi-practice behemoth in the Pennsylvania area. What brought you to the land of dental?
Probably about 20 years ago, I met my wife. Well, then my girlfriend, her dad, and her grandfather were both dentists. So she eventually went to dental school and came into working in her family practice. And essentially then we started to look at opportunities in dentistry and, what we could do. And then we decided to open up a scratch, actually. She graduated in 2015, started practicing, and then by 2018, we had opened the doors of a new location. At that point, her parents' practice was about 60 years old. We didn't really touch that. Horizontally moved over and started a new location, and then just went forward with that. And now we've gone back to the original location. We started to build that. And now we're looking towards the future, of course, to additional locations, because we've pretty much maxed out what we've got in our second location, and the original practice is really growing.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here and I'm gonna give Phil a little bit more credit than what he's giving himself right now. I've known Phil for maybe 5 to 8 years through the dental networks. We both kind of got started with Chris Ad as just like a platform for how to grow a practice. And Phil and I kind of hit it off early. Actually, Phil probably saw one of the first TeamCare presentations that there ever was in DC,
Yeah.
when it was just a hair more than a MVP. But I think Phil actually bought it, and I later disabled Phil's subscription because I felt like he was helping the product more than his $200. I was gaining more of a bill with his consulting than it was, so I just called that a wash. But Phil and I hit it off quickly because Phil and I both got sort of conned into this dental business through our wives as dentists, and we're both very entrepreneurial, tech forward people, and kind of got into this opportunity of the business of dentistry, which to so many people that have become an owner and an operator is a great gift, allows you to travel. Phil's a big travel guy, step away from the chair. So yeah, Phil's been a very prolific, in my opinion, operator that took, there's an existing framework there, but Phil took it from one level to 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 above that, and have scaled out your practice to maxing out one location, adding another. And I think your reputation on the street for people that know about you is like, you're very cool, calm, and collected about it. You have good systems in place. You're an amazing delegator to your leaders, and you've set up a great org structure there that has been this like really great platform for you to scale up and not really be stressed as that owner. So
Yeah.
that's
I
my
mean,
intro for you.
yeah. Well, thank you for that. I guess, that's one of the things, like, I don't really trying to have a big ego about it, because I don't want to be that guy. When my wife Lauren and I got involved, the original location had about 12 employees. Now we're over 50. It's a much larger operation, obviously, now than it was. And to do that, you need a lot of delegation, like Colin was saying. Like, we built some really cool managerial structures over that time, over the last 8 years. And that, I think, has really changed our perspective on what we're doing, because we don't, my wife doesn't practice really anymore. She does ortho a little bit, like one day every other week or something like that, half a day, I think, actually every other week. But she went from 5 to 6 days in the chair to that over an 8-year period. And 6 days for sure when we had just started. So it was like we went from traveling and enjoying life, and it was like, wow, you're a dentist, and like I've got, we're doing things, and we're trying. And then we opened up a practice. It's like 2 years of lockdown for us before COVID. So can I say that on here? I don't know if I can say
Of course. Of course.
You
Yeah.
can't say anything on the extraction.
on the extraction.
One thing that's really unique about the perspective that you have is if there was a leaderboard of dental practices that have been early adopters and advocates and have really used TeamCare as a tool, you would be up there in the top 1%. And on the podcast, we bring on guests and we're really mindful not to really hard sell TeamCare as a tool. A lot of the people that we bring on aren't even necessarily that familiar with TeamCare before they jump on. But I think for this episode, this is a hard sell for TeamCare because Phil is really familiar with it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been instrumental to the success that you and the team have had.
It kind of showed me.
Don't know if that's 100% true. I'd like to tout myself. No, and listen, I told it last episode, TeamCare has grown. We crossed over our 1,000th location recently. So we are doing something right. But I don't know whether I just find people that are growing their practices great and force them to use TeamCare, or that TeamCare is the actual catalyst there. Phil might fall into both categories.
I can appreciate what TeamCare has done. I'd say this, like getting away from the features of TeamCare, which I mean, I think you could expound all day. Like, right, there's like 100. I think having some of the access, like community level access that I've had, has been really instrumental as well. Like, I met Colin obviously through Chris ad, but like there are other people in the industry as well that have turned me on to ideas that I'm not 100% sure. Like, why was I opening up a scratch practice in the first place? What really started that ideology? And it was really just listening to other people who had done it before, and like, this is the path, this is the way you can do it. But along that journey, you need tools. I'd say like, I get real hesitant about this because I think I know some dentists and they are like, they love toys. And I would say that toys probably aren't really that critical if you want to grow your dental office, your dental practice, but they aren't unimportant either at some point. Like, you do really need to be able to inspect and validate what you're doing sometimes, because it can be very challenging to just fly by the seat of your pants. Like, intuition can get you pretty far if you've got pretty good, business intuition and you have a good sense of things. But when you're an operator versus an owner, those things are very different to me. Like, if I'm in the practice every day operating, that's cool. Like, I can do that and I can stay on top of the pulse of my own business. But when I shift into owner mode, that's very different for me. I'm not in the country for a month or 6 weeks at a time. I cannot operate my business the same way in that scenario. So I do need tools. I need to inspect it, like to be able to inspect the practice without actually looking at it. That's really how TeamCare has really shown me that, like, oh, okay, this is how you step away a little bit. You need to be able to keep your thumb on it, but not necessarily be there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We have so many people on here that talk very broadly about like leadership and delegating, and you gotta know what you're looking for when you walk into a practice. Can you just give us at least one like super tactical thing? And I remember back from when I interviewed you for the case study, like, what's a specific, like as specific as you can be with something in TeamCare? I know we could talk about features till the cows come home, but like I use this has become something that is so important as a part of our workflow. And for that reason, it's like opened up so many doors or freedom of time. And then we can go to Colin.
I can tell you what I think has really been instrumental for me individually, if that's
Please.
okay.
Please,
Yeah.
yes. Because the people that listen to this are practice owners and their office managers.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, here's someone who doesn't work anymore, for lack of a better
Thanks.
term, but still
I
owns the
haven't done anything for so long. I just don't know what it's like to work. Now, I think it's probably an unsung feature of TeamCare. I don't see it really publicized on the website very much, but I am very in tune with daily reports and notifications. That really informs me. I don't have to go seeking that information because it's formatted and thrown in my inbox in a way that I can just be like, cool, this is great. Everybody did a great job. Or I can see something that I'm instantly like, where are the recalls? Like, what's going on with that? Why isn't something happening? And admittedly, like, I have an operations director, have, 3 people that are seeing that. And I know they're probably managing it as well. But if I see that happening for 3, 4, 5 days in a row, I don't really need a lot of data points to understand if the practice is growing or not growing. Like, you don't really need that many data points. You can look at your overall hygiene. You can look at your doctor production for the last couple of, for yesterday, for today, for tomorrow. And I can get a sense of, if things are on track. Those types of reports just kind of give me an overall sense. I'm probably not getting, there are a lot of reports and notifications I don't deal with. I shouldn't say I don't care about them, but they're much more operator based. Like, I need other people looking at those things, but to get a broad scope of it, I think just being able to have really nice formatted data slung in my inbox whenever I wake up in the morning, wherever I am in the world, tells me what I need
Yeah.
to know about what's going on in my practice without having to be there, which is nice. So
Yeah, we
sorry,
sling it.
Colin, that's not
We
the one you
sling.
want.
No, no, no. It's fine. We sling it to you. Most of the screenshots I get from Phil are either from our mobile app or his inbox from his phone. So,
Can you
but I
change
think
this in the inbox? Like, can you
yeah,
put a new notification?
this isn't responsive enough.
This
But
one word is too big.
yeah, I appreciate that stuff, and I think it comes from it reminds me when the TeamCare was getting born. Sharon and I were out doing this thing called the Great Loop, where we took this boat all the way around the U.S. The reason that like TeamCare took that direction, usually like I feel like products take a turn because you feel a need. It was because I was away from the practice, and there was certain things, and we're not the first people to create any kind of analytics, but I think we were and are still one of the front runners in tracking individual metrics and also capturing the front office. I think that a lot of tools take the PMS as like the de facto set of data that is trackable. And all the PMSs still don't really visualize, track, or do anything towards the sales funnel, which, if you're actually running a business, it's great for you to see your hygienist and how many cleanings she's done. It's great for you to see the doctor and how many production. But when numbers start to, or you want to see these leading indicators of things starting to dip, and you start to want to trace back the problem, all roads kind of come through the front desk. Who presented the case? What did the patient say after they sent it?
To me, it makes perfect sense, right? Who's buying PMSs, right? So it's not the front desk, it's the dentist, right? So
True.
why are they investing in, they invest in the things they want the, dentists want to know, or, the chart tool needs to be perfect and all these things. And it's like, who cares?
Yeah. But it's
If you
like,
don't have anything to work on, like, it doesn't matter.
if I want to be a practice owner that steps away from the chair with my wife and is traveling often,
Small market. Yeah, that's a small market, I guess. I mean, it's a huge market. Everyone wants that,
yeah.
right? But transitioning to that is a big mental leap from where most people are today. So that's like it's
Yes.
just so
So tell us, I mean, team care aside, or weave it in there if you want to. We all like the weave, but talk about maybe some of your secret sauce for the practice owners. You're very nonchalant and casual about, yeah, I'm out of the chair. Yeah, I got 3 locations. Yeah, we travel a lot. Yeah, I got all these things going. But for people that aren't there yet and are still on the journey, maybe what are some of the key things that you feel like helped get you there in the biggest strides?
well, I'd say one of the toughest that I've had personally is just learning to kind of let go of some of the like control, I think, of
Which
everything.
I know Phil personally, this is like a very give and take comment here because
Yeah,
Phil
there are a
likes
lot of
control.
things that I still control. If I want to grow, like, so if I want to see 800 hygiene this month, right, between the 2 locations, I cannot control every interaction. I cannot control, to that level and that degree, I can't have that level of control over the practice. So I need to abstract levels of control to managers, right? And so how much control is reasonable at what level of the business is kind of what I've tried to develop. So, we have a pretty detailed leadership structure, right? So your immediate boss is most of the time your colleague, like it's somebody that you work with very directly on a day-to-day basis. Our front team has a front team lead, but they also have like day coordinators. So that's like who's the lead front for the day. And then, the whole team reports to a lead. But that lead reports to a director and that director reports to me. So there is,
Chain of command.
there's a chain of command. And while I'm very happy to, and commonly when we're in town, I try to sit down with every one of the 50 people who work with me for, which sounds a little crazy, but I will do meetings with pretty much everybody.
It's great.
Yeah, I remember you saying one time you were like, I gotta get back in there. I gotta present some treatment plans. I gotta see what stuff breaks. I gotta get pissed
Yeah.
off and get on the
Well,
ground
because
level.
I did it for several years when we opened up our scraps. Like it was just me, my wife, a hygienist. Like it was like 3, 4 people. So for 2 years, I was actually operating that office in a way that was like I was very intimately aware of every word that I would say. I am a little bit of a control freak in some ways, where like I would have an experience with the patient, I would type down notes on my laptop and I'd be like, what could I change about what I just
Yeah,
said? Like iterate and iterate and iterate until I developed good systems. But once you develop good systems, then it's about training and delegation. And I think that's that's the really tricky part. And I think for dentists, I think they have it just slightly harder than I do because you almost like you. I like to say that you have to be negligent somewhere if you're an owner and an operator. Like if you want to be the owner and the operator, you're always turning your face towards one of those two things. You can never do both at the same exact time. So if they're in the chair, right, doing dentistry, who's running the business? You're not. You have multiple responsibilities, so you almost need someone to kind of fill in that gap. Or you need to be willing to take a leap of faith and back out of the chair a little bit, bring an associate in, and
yeah.
start doing that. That
But also,
transition.
let's not underestimate, like, have a little bit business mind, as do I, and it's like the dentist that steps back from the chair, might not be the best systems designer. I think
Right. Yeah.
everyone, it's like, all right, I got this problem, I got to figure out a solution. Some people are better solution designers than others, and so I
Well, you
think
have to
if only
pick.
there was like a software that helped you systematize these things around the office.
The thing is like, I don't want to oversimplify, but it's not like dentistry is a pretty simple business. It's a,
It's very
it's,
repetitive, it's like it's
yeah,
repeatable.
it's very repetitive. It's very simple, and we can make it extraordinarily complex. My journey here has been like, how do I keep it drop dead simple all the way up until the point where I can scale with more complexity? And I think that, like, obviously, like I said, toys and tools will help you do that. But if you start there, if that's your only focus and goal is to like, well, when somebody comes in, I want to know, like, did they do this? Did they do like, you don't need to know that, right? Like you don't really need to know extraordinary levels of detail about every single patient. Like you think you start there. And so like here's a good example of like a system. Like you want to get an actual like granular level system that I feel like
Yes.
makes a lot of
Yes.
sense, right? Like it's a super highly detailed thing that sometimes like I
Give
get
it to
questions
us.
about.
Yes.
Okay. So if a new patient calls, we have a very specific strategy for how we handle new patient calls, right? There is basically a zero roadblock policy, right? I want that patient in the practice. And so if they call and they're like, hey, I've got blah, blah, blah insurance, whatever it is, no roadblocks, right? Right through the front door. No problem. Let's get them in the chair. Let's make this thing happen. So where people get hung up on that though, is they're like, well, what do I do if that patient comes in with an insurance and then that insurance doesn't pay for the thing? And then what do I do? Like I can't afford to do that. And I think what happens there, because what we do is I'm like, okay, cool. That's 5% of the patients. That's a very low percentage of patients, right? Who have an HMO or something that like Medicaid, whatever it is, whatever the situation is that doesn't allow that payment to come through the practice. So I remove that barrier and I say, that's okay. Let them come into the practice. We're going to see them and no one's going to say a single word to that patient about their insurance until after they are done with their visit. And at that point, we will write off the entire experience, right? And we're going to tell them about what our other options are if they would like to remain patients in the practice. I'd say about 40 to 60% of the patients, depending on the month, become patients of the practice despite having, right? But what commonly happens is one time that happens and the owner is
Yeah.
like, this is crazy. We're losing money on, it's like they come down on these people, and then the team gets timid, and then they start taking calls differently. And you can see like the trick,
Totally.
right? The whole thing bleeds together. If you don't have a policy that supports the actions that you want, then you cause unnecessary problems for people. So like our policy is like you get the pleasure and the luxury of telling somebody who, for something, they get something for nothing. They get something for free. And you should, the team enjoys that because they're like, hey, we're going to take care of this for you. Don't worry about it. It's on us. And, it kind of builds them up instead of knocks them down at the front desk. And so this is an example I feel like we've developed over time of like, there just really shouldn't be that roadblock there because it starts to change behavior. And once you start changing behavior, it's like I can do something as an owner that changes each individual little activity that occurs day to day. Like every time someone answers the phone, if I change that policy, they're like, man, is Phil going to come in and slam his fist on my desk because I let somebody through the golden gates or something like that? Like, I don't want them feeling that way. So we build policies that allow good results. And I think it is hard to look at that because like I said, if you're in the chair, I feel like your ego and your finances get tied very closely to that. And so it's like, I don't want to, they don't want to let go.
Yeah.
So, it's just like, there's averages involved, right? There's like the law of averages and stuff like that. And like,
It's
there's
like
just so many. Yeah.
it reminds me. I saw this video on Instagram recently of a Venus flytrap, and it just kind of slowly. This is probably a terrible metaphor to use with a patient, but if you're let them do the thing, let them feel comfortable, let them experience the hospitality. What
Yeah.
you're talking about is hospitality. If you treat everyone like a VIP, some people are going to take advantage of you, and that's what everyone remembers. Everyone remembers
Sure.
that. So I love that. That's a great takeaway, Phil. Thank you.
Well, I'm like, what does it cost you at this point, right? You got a hygienist. They're just sitting around at that point, right? What's the cost of a cleaning at that point? You're already all the costs are sunk, right? Some material cost. I mean, come on, that's crazy. And for 40 to 60% of those patients to return, that's not a
Yeah.
cost at all anymore. Those are cash patients. So, that there's a reality, and I'm sure some markets that may be a little bit different. In our market here in the boonies of northeastern Pennsylvania, it doesn't really happen that much, and when it does, it's kind of a blessing because then those patients, they get to experience something that's a little bit different, and then people don't remember that either, right? So and this is what I'm saying. Like, there's so many pieces to that puzzle, and it's just like we're talking about like the tiniest little thing, but I've thought about every possible outcome or scenario. It's like that patient has probably never been in a practice like ours in their lifetime.
Um,
So if they don't come back, you better believe they're telling somebody about it because they're like, "Hey, I went to this place. It's crazy. It was a dental office. I swear to God, it was a dental office, but I wasn't sure. Like, it was not like no place I've ever been." So you can't really put a price on that. So I feel like that's a pretty good example of like how we work tactically, very tactical, but it's a part of a much larger strategy of things. And I can't take credit for all of that, obviously. There are other people out there who have strategies that are similar to that, but yeah, it's
All right, Phil, before we wrap up, since you're deep rooted in the tech game,
yeah.
but we're talking about dental office. Tell us what's on your roadmap or what is in your office, what's in your toolkit AI wise in your office today or coming in the future. You got a receptionist, you got any image analysis, you got people in
Uh,
the room transcribing perio numbers. What do you got going on?
yeah, no,
You
probably none of that. I think our
got
practice,
workflows?
we really don't use a lot of AI at the moment. We in the practice, I don't really love the idea of AI taking over what I think is largely a service-based business for us. But there are obviously some benefits, some things that I see. We record all of our calls. That's one thing that I think is really important. And we record and announce all of our recordings. But that type of large data set, I think, has a lot of value potentially in the AI space to be able to kind of boil that down into like what is the sentiment basically of these calls and what's going on. So we're looking at some of that. There are some tools out there that use or that provide that sort of like transcription sentiment based service. And so I do dabble a little bit in software and things like that. But so to be able to connect some of our phone services to those types of tools, I think will be really powerful in the future. Data aggregate analysis, I have a couple of tools that pull data as well on the side. That I'll send you some ideas, Colin.
Yeah, please.
Nice.
But yeah, I think there are just pieces of the puzzle that are missing sometimes in service and not so much in how to, I'm not optimizing that much anymore right now. I'm thinking a little bit more about where we go next. But yeah, AI is going to change the game. I just don't think it's going to change the things that will help you grow your business. It may help you optimize your business, but I think too many people start on optimization too soon.
Truth.
And
That is a
they
great
really
soundbite. That's it. That's the winner
they
right
need to
there.
grow,
Yeah, it's still
Grow
about
first.
understanding the mechanics of how to grow an office and
It's
like
really,
simple concepts. And
simple
yeah, there's
concept.
support, but it's not about the next tool. What did you call it? Tools and
Tools and toys.
toys and tools and toys.
Tools and
Tools and
toys, yeah.
toys. The title of this episode.
You don't need tools and toys. You need probably just very simple, growth strategies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really think that that's what it comes down to. It's a simple business. Keep it simple. You can kind of keep growing. I think if people are really able to scale in their, and pick good delegation, to choose the right people to delegate to, and have tools like TeamCare that do help you delegate. And that's the other thing too. I feel like if you are just blindly delegating, you're also being a little negligent. Like you need to delegate, but you also need to have some oversight, some system to be able to go back and evaluate what those operators now are doing for you. So yeah, I think, but you can't wait too long to let go. Life is too short. I want to travel. I want to enjoy it. I don't want to sit in the dental office all day long. I think that's kind of crazy, but you're not building your dental office for your lifestyle. You're building your dental office for your patients. And then how you structure your dental office will allow you to live your lifestyle. So it's very good.
Wow.
Another good soundbite.
No, no,
Time it in
we have
overtime.
The mic drop,
we have a lot of talking heads on here, or like, other service professionals. And at the end we say, so where could people find more about the services that you offer? You are different in that sense. I mean, we could, check out Pacifico Dental Care if you need a root canal, but also if you're listening, Phil is like one of the warmest guys, obviously has a lot of time because he doesn't do anything anymore. So Phil,
Don't let
if
them
anyone
fool
wants to
you.
reach out to you and chat like owner to owner, would you be open to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love it. It's surprising because I feel like people get in touch with me and they're like, oh, there's so much. I've talked to many practice owners who are like, I feel like there's so much I can learn from you. And I'm like, there's kind of just something to learn from everyone. And it's like, even if you have some like big issue, it's like, wow, I never really thought about this issue before. And it gives you an insight. So yeah, it's super cool to always chat with other owners.
Awesome.
I don't have anything to sell. So, that's an easier conversation sometimes.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
True. Very true.
Well, Phil, thank you so much for joining
Appreciate
us
you
on
guys.
the pod.
Yeah. Thank you. All right.
Thank you for listening to The Extraction with Colin Ambler and Kyle Bergman. Read episode notes and transcripts at teamcaredental.com.